Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to Super Kaiju Binge. Welcome to the penultimate episode of March of the Apes. Pardon my absence last week, but it was a happy accident since there's uh, 5 Thursdays in this month, so I can get away with taking 1 week off and still finish out March of the Apes. But today on Super Kaiju Binge, we will be doing technically, this is a re-review because I reviewed this back in 2018. But that video, whew, is it hard to watch? It's horrendously pixelated and just very repetitive and a little forced. So I'm going to be rectifying that. Today, we will be talking about another one of my favorite films and monster movies, and another extremely underrated monster movie, in my opinion. Maybe not quite as much as Mighty Joe 98, though ironically, I like this movie a lot more than Mighty Joe 98. Still, today we will be talking about 2018's Rampage, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Yes, indeed. Man, I'm just all over the place in my years for March of the Apes, aren't I? 2005, 1998, 2018. Still though. So, Rampage, full disclosure, I don't think I'm going to have very much to say about this as much as I love this film. I just don't I don't think I'm going to have as much to say about it. It'll just be a very straightforward review, but still. Um, as far as personal history goes for Rampage, admittedly, I don't have. Hold on a second. That's a little better. I don't have that much to say as far as personal history goes. I was made aware of this film's existence by Jackie Boy back in 2017 or maybe early 2018. Jackie Boy did his King Kong video games episode for his King Kong review series. And I do believe that he mentioned a few of the original Rampage games in that video. And during the course of that video, he mentioned that there was a movie adaptation on the way. So I was like, oh, wow, really? I heard absolutely nothing about this. And I was instantly intrigued when I found out that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would be involved with this movie. So, snap your finger, and as soon as I knew it, um, or before I knew it, Rampage was out in theaters, and then it was out on DVD. I sadly did not see this in theaters. I kick myself in the ass every single day for not having gone to see this in theaters. It would have been a nice holdover for me to see in theaters for the wait of Godzilla King of the Monsters to finally be over. This and The Meg. I also did not see The Meg in theaters, and I kick myself in the ass every day for not seeing that in theaters as well. But anyway, so as soon as this was out on DVD, I snatched it up along with The Meg, and I sat down and watched it in one sitting. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It instantly became a favorite film of mine, this and The Meg. And back when Trevor Boy was a part of the channel, he and I had a conversation one time about how it does feel like we are in the middle of a kaiju renaissance. Um, and he mentioned to me that Rampage and The Meg make for a very good double feature to watch both films back to back. Yeah, I agree. I will admit that I think I prefer The Meg over Rampage by a hair's breadth, but still, this movie instantly became a favorite of mine, and I absolutely dig the shit out of this movie. I just enjoy it more and more and more every time I watch it. Um, Another full disclosure, I've never played any of the original Rampage games, not a single one. I am familiar enough with the story And I am aware that as an adaptation, like a beat for beat adaptation of the original Rampage game, I am aware that this isn't very strong. But with that being said, I'll take this movie over any of the games any day. I'm sorry to say. I know that, well, I'm also not sorry to say, but I know that the Rampage franchise has its fair share of fans, which is all well and good, but it's just not really a franchise that looks interesting to me. A lot of those games look extremely repetitive and tedious and monotonous to me. So I'll take this movie over any of those games any day. But yeah, full disclosure, never played the games. I like the story of the games, but the gameplay itself just doesn't really scream to me as being fun. So, with all that being said, let's jump into the plot of Rampage, shall we? And before we begin, a word from our sponsor. Oh, I probably should say Rampage is a 2018 American science fiction action adventure monster movie. Rolls right off your tongue. Directed by Brad Payton and loosely based on the video game series of the same name by Midway Games. The film stars Dwayne Johnson in the lead role, Naomi Harris, Malin Ackerman, Jake Lacey, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan of Walking Dead fame. It follows a primatologist who must team up with George, an albino western lowland gorilla who turns into a raging creature of enormous size and growing into bigger and bigger sizes as a result of rogue experiments to stop two other mutated animals from destroying Chicago. This was the third collaboration between Brad Payton and Dwayne Johnson, following Journey to the Mysterious Island and San Andreas, neither of which I've seen. It was released in April 13th. Oh, wow. April 13th, 2018 by Warner Brothers Pictures. The film grossed $428 million and received mixed reviews from critics against a $120 to $140 million budget. But positive reception from audience members with praise for its performances, action sequences, and visual effects, but criticism of its screenplay, pacing, and storyline, all of which I disagree with. The plot of the film: Athena 1, a space station owned by a gene manipulation company, Energene, is destroyed after a laboratory rat mutates and wreaks havoc. Carrie Atkins, the lone surviving crew member, manages to escape in the escape pod when the station implodes, along with pathogen canisters that Energene CEO Claire Wyden orders her to retrieve. But the pod disintegrates upon re-entry, killing her and leaving a trail of debris across the United States. One canister is swallowed by an American crocodile in the Everglades, and another lands in a Wyoming forest where a wolf is exposed to the pathogen. Primatologist David Okoye, played by The Rock, a former Special Forces soldier and member of an anti-poaching unit, works at the San Diego Wildlife Sanctuary. He has befriended a rare albino western lowland gorilla named George, based on the real-life albino gorilla named Snowflake. Okoye saved George from poachers who killed his mother when he was a baby and communicates with him using sign language. One of the canisters crash lands in George's habitat and he is exposed to the pathogen. As George grows considerably larger and becomes more aggressive, Davis is contacted by genetic engineer Dr. Kate Caldwell, played by Naomi Harris. She played Calypso in Pirates of the Caribbean, who explains that the pathogen was developed by Energene to rewrite genes on a massive scale. She had hoped to advance research on CRISPR. CRISPR is a family of DNA sequences found in the genomes of prokaryotic organisms such as bacteria and archaea as a potential cure for diseases, but discovered Energene's plans to use it as a biological weapon and was falsely incarcerated, during which her terminally ill brother died of cancer. George escapes from captivity and goes on a rampage at the preserve. George calms down, but is soon captured by a government team led by Agent Harvey Russell, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and put on a Boeing C-17 Globemaster III airplane. Meanwhile, Claire and her brother Brett oversee a mercenary team's attempt to capture the mutated wolf, Ralph, which goes awry and the entire team is slaughtered. Claire, hoping to capture Ralph and use George to cover up her plot, uses a massive transmitter atop the Willis Tower to lure the animals engineered to respond aggressively to a certain radio frequency to Chicago, unconcerned about the massive risk to civilian lives this poses. George reacts violently to the sound and crashes the plane, though Davis, Kate, and Russell parachute to safety. George survives the crash and joins Ralph as they make their way to Chicago, while Davis and Kate are aided by Russell in stealing a military helicopter in pursuit. They arrive to find George and Ralph rampaging through the city as the military struggles to contain them. The situation worsens when the giant mutated crocodile Lizzie joins the duo, causing even more casualties. To quote The Rock, well, that sucks. Planning to steal an antidote to turn the animals back to normal, Davis and Kate infiltrate Energene's base of operations at the tower and take several vials of the cure, but are caught by the Widens as Claire reveals that the antidote only eliminates the animals' enhanced aggressiveness rather than reversing the other effects, and shoots Davis. But he does survive because he's the Rock. He's built like a rock. When George climbs to the top of the tower in Rampage fashion, Claire orders Davis to distract it while she attempts to escape with Kate at gunpoint. Kate slips a vial into Claire's handbag and pushes her towards George, who devours the terrorist along with the vial, returning him to his normal personality. Down below, Russell takes incriminating evidence from Brett, who is then crushed to death by falling debris, also in Rampage style. As the damaged tower topples, in true Rampage style, Davis and Kate survive by crash landing a helicopter on the Federal Plaza. Davis stays to help George defeat the other animals, while Kate and Russell rush to prevent the military from deploying a Moab, mother of all bombs, against them. George battles against Ralph, whom Davis tricks into advancing towards Lizzie, who decapitates him using her jaws. Lizzie chases Davis, but George intervenes in time for Davis to incapacitate her using grenades. However, Lizzie survives and overpowers George, who is impaled on a piece of rebar. Davis distracts Lizzie using a fallen Apache attack helicopter, and he is nearly killed before George pierces Lizzie through the eye with the same rebar into her brain, killing her. With the threat neutralized, the airstrike is aborted. In the aftermath, George and Davis, joined by Kate and Russell, help clear the city of debris and rescue civilians, ending the movie on a very happy note. And George doesn't fucking die! Yay! Ooh. So, how about this story? It is very simple. It's just a standard. Okay, that's better. It's a standard giant monster on the loose movie. But it works. Just because something's simple doesn't mean that it's bad. This movie is not deep. It doesn't have any social commentary. It doesn't have any political themes or hidden messages. It's not trying to be anything more than what it is. It's just trying to be a fun popcorn giant monster movie. And I think it succeeds 100% of the time. This is a very entertaining, well made, very engaging, very quick movie. It's an hour and 47 minutes, but I was surprised at how quickly this movie kept going. It never stopped, it never slowed down. It always just moved at a very natural pace. I'll be talking about that a little bit more, but yeah, I dig the fuck out of it. I don't mind all the liberties that it takes with the original story outline from the games. As I said, I prefer this over the games. Yeah, not much to say. I just dig this movie story. I think it's fun. So I have I have 10 pros. Pro number one is Davis Okoye, played by Dwayne the Rock Johnson. I love him. Uh, you could say that at this point, it kind of is a very standard, typical Dwayne the Rock Johnson protagonist. Um, which in many ways, yes, that is true. Although I really like the connection that he has with George, and I like that. Sure, he was a special forces agent at one point. Well, I like the fact that he was an anti-poacher guy. If I was to join the military for any reason, I think for me, it would be against poachers because I would totally take out some poachers. They're just fucking disgusting pieces of shit. But I like that about his character, but I also like that he is also a primatologist. I mean, yeah, sure, 6'5", 250-pound muscle-bound dude doesn't exactly strike you as a primatologist, but he makes it work. He obviously knows a lot about primatology, but specifically, he knows how to handle apes. He knows how to move and talk and interact with apes. He knows how to do sign language, which is nice. He knows how to placate them. He knows how to educate people on what to do and what not to do with apes. And his connection with George and the other apes at the animal place, it's believable. It's good. It's really well done, in my opinion. And of course, he is a very likable, very proactive, and very entertaining protagonist. He thinks on his feet. He knows how to use guns, knows how to fly a helicopter. He's just a major man of action, which is something that I really love with my protagonist. So Davis is great. Love him. Not a deep character by any means, but neither is this movie. It's not a deep film. So The Rock does just fine with what he's given. Pro number two is Harvey Russell, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I love him. At first, you might think, hold on. At first, it's implied, at least to me, that right off the bat, Harris and Davis do not see eye to eye whatsoever. And I definitely did fall for the film, lulling me into thinking, oh, this guy's going to be a villain. He's going to be the villain, or at least he's going to be a major thorn in the Rock's side. But when George freaks out at the radio signal on board the plane, Harris gets knocked out, and the Rock has to save him, strap a parachute to him, and while he's unconscious, and save his life. And Harris immediately appreciates what the Rock did for him, and the rest of the movie, not really an unspoken, but Harris and Davis have this newfound respect for each other. And the rest of the movie, Harris is doing anything he can to either inform The Rock on what's going on or just stepping in and helping him with whatever he can. It's a very good, respect connection between the two. And Jeffrey D. Morgan does look like he's having fun playing this older, more cowboy-esque CIA agent, and um, he's just a little bit hammy. And if you're familiar with The Walking Dead at this point, he does feel just a little bit like Negan, but in a more protagonistic kind of way. It's a lot of fun. Harris is a fun character, and yeah, I love his relationship with Davis. At first, they were antagonistic, but after Davis saves him, they're not exactly friends, but they make good teammates, which is great. Love their chemistry. Pro number 3 is George. I love George in this movie. George was played. Oh, god damn it! God damn it! Blah. Excuse me. Hold on. There we go. Oh shit. Well, George was played by Jason Lyles. There's no link here for this guy, but yeah, he did motion capture performance for George. Um, yeah, not much to say because the monsters are very simple. They're just giant animals. Well, I'll talk about the other ones in just a minute, but George is great. I do believe that the same effects company for King Kong '05 did this movie. Talking about the effects later, but the motion capture performance is very good for George. And George's personality and his design is great. He is a giant albino gorilla. Pink skin, white hair, a typical albino gorilla, but his facial expressions are very good. And you get a very good sense of George's personality throughout the course of this movie. When he is himself, he's very playful, um, but he's also very perverted, and he has a bit of a twisted sense of humor, and he's a kind of a total smartass. But still, he's a lot of fun to watch. Um, the motion capture performance is really good. He's a cool bat. Oh, that hurts. He's a cool badass giant gorilla. Not much to say. Just that George is great. Love him. And the next pro is Ralph and Lizzie. I'm going to talk about them at the same time because, like I said, the monsters in this movie are very simple. That's not a bad thing, but still, I like the other monsters. Ralph is a giant, like 40-foot long, um, giant wolf with porcupine spines coming out of him, with flying squirrel flaps his skin between his arms and legs. Leads to a funny moment. But yeah, again, simple monster. He does also have the ability to like grow out giant porcupine quills and throw them at his enemies. He only does it once, but still, it's cool. He makes for like a good agile speedster type guy. But yeah, Ralph's a lot of fun to watch. I like his design. And Lizzie, a giant crocodile with an ankylosaur tail, ankylosaur armor on its back, fish gills, and a frilled lizard frill with an extremely malformed and toothy mouth. Lizzie is a sight to behold. Her first intro in the movie, where she comes out of the Chicago River and she's roaring to the skies and starts going on her rampage throughout the city. It's a really great intro and it's a great spectacle. It's like a good oh shit moment. And her design is really good too. She's definitely the big giant tank of the three monsters. But she's awesome. She feels like a good final boss. Um, so yeah, Lizzie is awesome. Again, Like I said, not much to say about with the monsters, but they're good for what they are. Oh, and real quick, I would definitely say George is a good balance between Ralph and Lizzie. He's fast and agile, but he's also strong. So that makes him a good balance for both Lizzie and Ralph. Even though I have kind of a problem with George, but I'll get to that later. Pro number 5 is the pacing of the film. I kind of already touched on this, but this is a big criticism that this movie gets from a lot of people, but I don't really get it. I like the pacing of this movie. This movie does not need to be draggy. It doesn't need to be slow. It doesn't need to be filled with unnecessary scenes. Every part of the film feels integral. They're good setup, uh, good character development, good exposition, great action scenes, of course. There are a couple moments where the movie, like, well, I guess it does kind of slow down just a little bit, but it's to give that good exposition and to develop its characters. But it's also just good setup for the next action scene. It's fine. Again, hour and 47-minute long movie. Um, it's just fine. It's not too much, but not too little. It's just perfect in my opinion. I think the pacing is just fine. Pro number 6 is the humor. This movie is pretty funny, in my opinion. There's some really good chuckle and snicker moments. Nothing like gut bustingly funny, but this movie does have a sense of humor. Um, George and Davis's friendship has a lot of funny quirks to it. Davis taught George how to give the finger, which he does twice in this movie. Um, there's a lot of funny one-liners from the characters, like when one that cracked me up when Harris shows up and takes the evidence from one of the villains. He takes a laptop, takes a mutated rat. He's just like, "You just go on out that door." Okay, okay, just thank you. See you later. Gets crushed by a falling rock. Harris just like, "Oh, okay, that's a lot." I I thought that was surprisingly funny. Um, and this also made me laugh too. When Lizzie makes her appearance, fully mutated from the Chicago River, Davis looks at her and just goes, "Well, that sucks." I thought that was funny too. The funniest scene in the movie is at the end. They do like a fake out. Oh, is George is dead or is he not dead? At the end, but Davis notices George's hand move, so then he looks up at George, and George is like peeking at him with one of his eyes, and then he like quickly shuts it. Did you just open your eye? I see you opening your eye, dude. You're not dead. Very, very funny. So then he wakes up. He's just like, and then he signs to him, "You look like shit." "Oh, I look like shit? You should take a look in the mirror. You look like big shit. Very, very big shit." And then George notices Davis talking to Dr. Caldwell. So he's just like, he's like, "No, no, no, we're not going to be doing that." She's just like, "Okay, I'm out of here." And then Davis looks up at him and just winks. That's funny. Again, nothing like gut bustingly funny, but you get some good snicker moments out of this movie. This movie knows what it's trying to be. Its tongue is planted firmly in its cheek. It's just trying to have a fun time. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like it. Still in the middle of the Hollywood humor renaissance era, in my opinion, started in 2015. Although I think it ended the next year, in my opinion. Still though. Um, Yeah, I love the humor. It's good. Nothing, again, I already said this, nothing side splittingly funny, but it's kind of self aware and you can get some good Snickers out of it. Pro number seven is Energene. I like the concept of Energene. I don't know if that's the same name of the evil corporation in the Rampage games, but uh, I just like Energene. Kind of feels like Diet Umbrella Corporation from Resident Evil. They just want to make um, they want to research DNA just for biological weapons, and then put out a front to the public and say, "Yeah, we're doing all these great things," but actually they're doing very terrible things. Um, a bit cliche, admittedly. Like we've seen this before in other movies, but still, I do like Energene as a concept, and I wish they could have done a little bit more with it. Not much to say about that. I just like Energene. Not much to say about this movie, obviously. Pro number eight is the action scenes in this movie are a lot of fun. Pro number eight and nine is the fun action scenes and the fun monster fights. The action really starts when Ralph is slaughtering that mercenary team. Uh, that's a lot of fun. They're trying their damnedest to shoot this wolf down, but it's just darting left and right, tearing people to pieces. Um, but still, it's fun. Then, when George is awakened by the radio transmission on the plane, he starts freaking out, uh, smacking people and throwing them left and right who are trying to shoot him down. He's tearing shit up on the plane. And then finally, the plane is destroyed and it goes down. That's a fun, intense action scene. When Ralph and George are tear assing their way through military convoys, and especially when they get to Chicago, they're fucking shit up left and right, uh, knocking over vehicles, tearing apart buildings, tearing through bridges, taking down airplanes, fucking shit up left and right. It's a lot of fun. And then when they start destroying the radio tower building, they are just ripping the shit out of this skyscraper, and it's a lot of fun to watch, especially when Lizzie starts climbing the building slowly. At one point, she tunnels her way into the building in one end and then comes out the other and just starts ripping it to pieces. It's a real sight to behold, and it's a lot of fun to watch. Um, Finally, this will lead me into the ninth pro, which is the fun monster fight. When George has his mind back, he then goes no holds barred, fucking up Ralph and Lizzie best he can. Um, I have one problem with it, actually, kind of two. But still, it's a giant gorilla taking on a giant flying wolf. Oh, which that's another one. When George gets a hold of Ralph and tries to throw him into a building, he deploys his wings and then safely lands back on his feet. And then Davis is just like, of course, the wolf flies. That's a good, fun, laugh out loud moment, too. But yeah, it's a giant gorilla going up against a giant wolf and a giant crocodile. Of course, it's a lot of fun. Um, yeah, not much to say. And my last pro number 10, is the special effects. No practical effects to speak of. George is done via motion cap, and I think Liz and Ralph are all just CGI animations. But you know what? Who cares? This movie had 120 to 140 million dollars to work with. It shows all the green screen composite shots look great. All the CGI looks really good. The explosions look great. The city destruction scenes are all well done. There's maybe one or two green screen shots here or there that just look a little obvious, mainly when The Rock is running around in a destroyed Chicago trying to help George take down Lizzie. There's a couple green screen shots that look a little obvious, but still, all the special effects across the board are phenomenal, especially the detail in George's face. Like you can see all of the facial expressions that he makes throughout the course of the film. It's all very believable and very well animated and very well detailed. It's fantastic. Again, I think it was the same company that did King Kong '05 that did the effects for this movie, and you know what? Call me crazy. I think in some ways it might just be a little bit better. Um, I don't know. It's hard to beat Andy Serkis as King Kong, but I don't know. I think they're pretty comparable. So yeah, the effects are great. No problems whatsoever with them. If you got a monster movie, you got to have great effects. And this movie pulls that off quite well. So with all these great things to say about Rampage, surprisingly brief, let's get into. I have three nitpicks and two full on cons. One nitpick is very minor, and that is I think this movie should have been R rated. This didn't need to be like over the top, violent, and gruesome. But if it had the R rating, they could have pushed the monster violence a little bit more. They could have pushed the monster on human violence even more. And they could have pushed the humor even more because there's kind of a sexual overtone to a lot of the humor. Had it just not had any restraints, it could have been even funnier. Could have had some really good jokes thrown into this, but that's very minor. I still love this movie the way it is. But the scene that really does kind of irritate me, and as to why I think this should have been R rated, is when Ralph is tearing apart all the mercenaries. There's one quick shot where the lone survivor comes across the rest of his team torn apart. One guy had his legs bitten off. There's dismembered arms and limbs, and dismembered torso. There's blood and gore, but it's very quickly and kind of poorly shot to hide the gore from the audience. It's just a very quick off center shot of all the gore. And that came off to me like they were really trying to hide all of that. Punk asses. Um, I just think those it's kind of a shame that this wasn't R rated. Again, not a major problem. Still, I think it was just kind of a missed opportunity. Nitpick number two. Two and three do kind of go with each other. I said that the pacing is just fine, but I still think that this movie is a little too short. I'd have been happier if this was a solid 2 hour movie. Had it kept that pace, it would have been just fine. But I mainly say that it's too short. Oh, owie. Still using this shitty metal chair. I think the fight between Ralph and George is too short. All George does to him is throw him in the air, smack him in the face, and then get tricked by Davis into being killed by Lizzie. For Ralph, I mean. That's it. And that's another thing is the death of Ralph. It's cool, but what really throws me off is that Lizzie tears his head off with her jaws. There's not an ounce of blood. There would have been gallons of blood splashing all over the place with a 30-foot long or 40-foot long wolf getting its head torn off by a 120-foot long crocodile. There's a noticeable lack of blood. But yeah, I just think the fight between Ralph and George is just too short. Ralph and Lizzie's fight is decently long, so why couldn't Ralph and George get more? Um, but again, just the nitpick. Um, I really just want to see all three of these monsters tear up Chicago and tear each other up a little bit more because I'm a monster movie fan. I'm just a little bit selfish that way. What we do have, though, is still entertaining for what it is. So, again, just a nitpick. Con number one, both human villains are so paper thin. They're so typical, so bland, and so one dimensional. They're just greedy, evil, snobby, piece of shit business tycoons. All they care about is the bottom dollar, figuring out some kind of way to screw somebody over, save their own ass, and just rake in billions and billions and billions of dollars. That is literally it. There's no depth to them. There's nothing more than the surface level shit that we see with them. The actor who plays the brother, he's known for playing sniveling little bitch asses. So that at least is somewhat entertaining to watch because you can just tell he's a complete pansy ass. But still, the human villains just kind of suck. Not a major problem by any means, but they're just very typical. But the biggest problem that I have with this movie, compared to kind of Ralph, but especially Lizzie, George feels very underpowered and he gets his ass kicked a bit too much. Against Ralph, it's a bit more evenly matched because they're similar in size. It's just a matter of Ralph is more agile, but George is stronger. But that fight feels fairly evenly matched. But going up against Lizzie, George is like woefully overpowered, or underpowered, I should say. Like he's completely outclassed almost. The one thing that he has against Lizzie is that he's much more agile, but everything else, like Lizzie's heavily armored. She has more weapons. She's larger. None of the monsters in this movie, well, I would definitely call them kaiju sized, but they're not nearly as big as like Pacific Rim monsters or Monsterverse kaiju. Um, I think George at his largest is maybe about 30 feet tall. I think Ralph is about 40 feet. And like I said, I think Lizzie is about 100 to 120 feet. So big monsters, sure, but they're not overwhelmingly large. But just the size difference between Lizzie and George is just nuts. It's a bit sad, honestly, because for a good chunk of their fight, Lizzie is kicking the shit out of George. And by the end of it, his white fur is completely slathered in his own blood, dirt, and soot. It's a bit sad. Now, George does deliver a very good final killing blow, and he delivers a couple good hits towards Lizzie. The first one, Lizzie charges at George, and George picks up a crane and smashes it into Lizzie's jaws and just clonks her right out. And then there's another one where George saves Davis from Lizzie. He's got like a concrete truck in his hand, and he smashes it down on Lizzie's head. And to kill her, he takes out a piece of rebar that he was impaled on and pierces her eye into her skull, and that's what kills her finally. It's really cool and badass. Still, though, I really feel that George gets his ass kicked a bit too much by Lizzie. It's just a little sad. Um, yes, JT is reborn is right. So that'll lead me into my final thoughts on this movie. I didn't think this review would be so short. Um, oh well, that's okay. While I wouldn't exactly say that Rampage is a masterpiece, I want to. As a video game movie, this movie is a shit ton of fun. It may not be accurate that much to its source material, but I still say it takes enough of its source material to turn this into something very fun. Like what Shawnee Boy here is saying, Rampage is a fun monster movie. If you just want to throw on a modern monster movie that is not too complicated, not too complex, nothing more than what it's trying to be, a fun, entertaining popcorn monster movie, you can't do much better than this, except maybe The Meg, but even still. Rampage, I think, is a very special movie. I think it's a very underrated and underappreciated monster movie. Maybe not one of The Rock's best movies, but it is his one monster movie, so I guess it's pretty unique for that. I love the shit out of this movie. It's a lot of fun. It's very entertaining, very well made. I just dig the fuck out of it. So I will be giving this movie not a perfect 10, unfortunately. Oh, Jackie boy, you come way too late, right at the very end. I will be giving Rampage a solid 9. I highly recommend this movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'd probably say it's one of my favorite monster movies. It's low on that list, but still definitely one of my favorites. So, no, I'm not reviewing King Dong, Jackie boy. Hell no. Look forward next week to the final episode of March of the Apes. Yeah, is that 18 in your bed? Yeah, look forward to the final episode of March of the Apes where I review what I do consider to be a legit masterpiece. I don't give a fuck what anybody says about it. Look forward to next week. And as always, post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. No, it is not going to be ape versus monster, and sure as hell not ape versus mecha ape. And as always, I will see you guys in the next video.